Here's the story of Chris Smith, a man who was shot in the head and left bleeding for over 12 hours without any medical attention. He survived thanks to his loyal dog. Experts say his dog stayed by his side for 12 hours, helping keep him alive during this critical time. On Thanksgiving morning of 2021, ambulance sirens echoed through the small rural town of Farmersville, Illinois. As residents peered out their windows wondering what was happening, a woman was desperately calling for help. Emergency responders who arrived at the scene discovered a man collapsed on the kitchen floor. By his side was a dog named Tiki, curled up protectively next to its owner. What had happened the night before? On November 23, 2021, Leslie Reeves from Illinois was getting ready for a new date. She was a divorced mother of two and a Pilates instructor. She drove an hour to the small rural town of Farmersville to meet a man she had recently connected with online for their first date. Her date was 48-year-old Chris Smith, a father of one who worked for a swimming pool construction company. Leslie and Chris met at a local bar. The place was bustling that night, and Leslie and Chris spent hours talking and mingling with others around them. Around 10 p.m., Leslie texted her friend Nanette Steyer saying, "Everything's fine." But shortly after, she sent a second text, "Something feels a bit off." That was the last anyone heard from Leslie. On Thanksgiving morning, when Nanette hadn't heard anything from Leslie, she grew worried. When Leslie didn't respond to her messages, Nanette anxiously drove to Farmersville herself. She had Chris's home address that Leslie had shared with her beforehand. When Nanette arrived, another woman was already standing in front of the house. As they talked about who they were looking for, Nanette went to the back door and peered inside. What she saw was horrifying. Chris was lying on the floor, bleeding, with Tiki by his side. Nanette immediately called the police. When police and paramedics arrived, they rushed Chris to the hospital. But Leslie was already dead from a gunshot wound to her head. What had begun as a first date had turned into a terrible tragedy. When investigators examined the scene, they found several unusual details. The glass on the back door was shattered. The refrigerator had been pulled away from the wall. The kitchen table was pushed aside, and chairs were overturned. There was a burnt pizza in the oven. Investigators speculated that while they were baking a pizza, a suspect appeared at the door, and the two tried to block them from entering. But the suspect got in anyway. After Chris was shot, Leslie apparently tried to flee to the living room to hide. Blood was everywhere in the kitchen, on cabinets, the refrigerator, countertops, and in every corner. Investigators found two silver shell casings from what appeared to be a 9mm handgun. One was found in the kitchen and the other near Leslie's body. However, no weapon was found at the scene. Investigators began looking into the victims' backgrounds. Chris Smith was a 48-year-old divorced father who worked for a swimming pool company and lived with his dog Tiki. According to his family and friends, Chris was a homebody who enjoyed working in his backyard. Paramedics suspected that Tiki had laid next to the bleeding Chris for about 12 hours, helping maintain his body temperature and playing a crucial role in his survival. Leslie was a divorced mother of two. She had a master's degree in engineering but chose instead to teach Pilates and self-defense classes for women. However, Leslie had an ex-boyfriend who was obsessive and stalked her, which Nanette informed the investigators about. His name was Bobby Tarr, a construction worker, and Leslie had been trying to cut off all contact with him. Investigators went to Tarr's home, about an hour and a half from the crime scene, to find him. When confronted by investigators, Tarr didn't ask any questions and agreed to go to the police station without a lawyer. During questioning, Tarr claimed that he and Leslie were still dating. When investigators told him that Leslie had been murdered, he expressed surprise. Investigators asked Tarr about Farmersville, the crime scene location, and he claimed he had never heard of it nor been there. When asked where he was on the night before Thanksgiving, Tarr said he went to a friend's house and came back shortly after. However, when his 17-year-old daughter Shelby was questioned separately, she said her father had left the house twice that night. The first time was around 6:30 p.m., and the second time he was gone for over 2 hours, returning around 9:15 p.m. According to Shelby, Tarr was crying when he returned, saying he missed Leslie. She also testified that her father started doing laundry around 2:45 a.m. and was pacing, unable to sleep. When investigators confronted Tar with the inconsistencies between his and Shelby's stories, he changed his account, saying he went to his friend's house twice but still claimed he was home by 8 p.m. While Tar was at the police station, investigators searched his home and found his cell phone and a Glock pistol. Shelby mentioned that her father had a small military green gun that she had seen in his drawer that morning before Thanksgiving, but it was now gone. Investigators suspected this gun was used in the crime, but it wasn't found in Tar's home. However, they obtained crucial evidence that Tar's vehicle was captured by a license plate recognition camera near a gas station close to his residence just after midnight on the day of the incident. Tar claimed he couldn't remember this, but investigators considered him a prime suspect and arrested him. Tar maintained his innocence, remaining calm during media interviews, saying, "I have many stories that will prove my innocence." He denied killing Leslie or shooting Chris, but admitted he had lied initially during the investigation. After first claiming he didn't even know where Farmersville was, Tar changed his story, saying that Leslie had asked him to follow her to Chris's house because her car was unstable. He claimed he parked his car in front of Chris's house and then left. However, Leslie's friends strongly argued that she feared Tar and had been stalked by him, making his statements not credible. Tar emphasized that there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and indeed, no evidence like bloodstains or fingerprints was found on his vehicle, clothes, or shoes. But a few days later, Tar's family reported finding a zippered bag containing a Springfield Hellcat 9mm pistol in his yard. The gun matched the shell casings found at the crime scene. Tar claimed he had been framed, but his fingerprints were found on the zippered bag. Interestingly, while no DNA from Tar was detected on the gun's exterior, Leslie's DNA was found on internal components of the gun. Investigators concluded that Tar had wiped the gun to remove evidence, but couldn't completely clean the internal parts. Tar claimed the gun actually belonged to Leslie, but her acquaintances refuted this, saying they had never seen her own or use that model of gun. Moreover, Tar was caught offering another inmate $110,000 to eliminate investigators or Chris who might testify against him. As a result, Tar was additionally charged with 2 counts of solicitation of murder, in addition to the attempted murder of Leslie and Chris. Fortunately, 2 months after the shooting in January 2022, Chris regained consciousness. However, due to brain damage from the shooting, Chris had lost his memory of that day and didn't even recognize Leslie's name. Some bullet fragments still remain in his brain, his left leg is partially paralyzed, and he rarely gets to see his daughter. Additionally, Chris didn't attend Tar's trial in April 2024 due to his anger over the situation. In court, Bobby tried to convince the jury that he wasn't a violent person. The prosecution argued that Tar had stalked Leslie and Chris's date, tried to break into Chris's house, and when Leslie and Chris attempted to block the door with the refrigerator, Tar shot through the door, hitting Chris, then pursued and killed Leslie. Tar's defense team countered that there was insufficient physical evidence. No DNA or fingerprints from Tar were found at the scene, and they suggested that the extensive blood spatter in the kitchen indicated there might have been another attacker. After 3 hours of deliberation, the trial concluded with Bobby Tar being found guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison. This concludes the story of the horrific murder that took place on Thanksgiving Eve and Tiki, the dog who saved his owner's life.